February 4th, 1968. Dong Ba District, Hue City, South Vietnam. The dust hadn't even settled. Smoke hung in the street like a curtain, thick and warm, clinging to the inside of Corporal Elijah Hook May's nostrils. Somewhere behind the shattered archway of the Dong Ba market, a child's bicycle frame lay twisted around the leg of a dead buffalo. Blood pooled into broken ceramic tiles, already turning black under the Sunday dunner. And still silence. Hook lay prone, nestled into a collapsed second-floor veranda, his elbows cushioned against a rice mat layered with a poncho. The barrel of his M40 poked through a jagged tear in the cement railing, wrapped in gauze to kill the glint. Beside him, Lance Corporal Darren Tabbs Coulter whispered, "Third floor, northeast corner." Drapes moved. Could be wind, could be a scout. Hook didn't answer. He just clicked the adjustment knob on his scope, but not the factory scope. This one was different. What rested on the rail wasn't a standard Redfield 39X. It was Frankensteined. The original lens tube had cracked 2 days ago during an ambush near Highway 1. Hook, refusing to be sidelined, had scavenged a busted camera from a war photographer's abandoned bag, raided a Vietnamese optician's storefront for a cracked concave lens, and grafted it all onto a hacked scope rail using rubber bootstraps, 2 spoon handles, and a piece of polished mirror the size of a cigarette lighter. He'd angled the mirror to bounce the image through the lens at 30 degrees, letting him keep his rifle flat behind cover while still seeing through the deflection. It distorted slightly, warped colors. But it worked. It made him invisible. The VC never saw the muzzle, only the flash. Through the tricked scope, the room came into focus. Thin curtains, a flutter, movement. Then the silhouette of a man kneeling, binoculars raised, his face backlit in the window like a ghost. Hook inhaled once, let it out slow. "Dial in 2 clicks, right, slight elevation," Coulter whispered. Hook didn't move. He'd already done it in his head. He squeezed the trigger. The M40 barked once, a whisper more than a roar in the smoke-choked alley. Through the scope, the figure dropped instantly. Not backwards, sideways. Dead weight collapsing like a marionette whose strings had been cut. The binoculars hit the floor a second later. Coulter muttered, "One." In Hue, they were hunting spotters. VC scouts embedded in the upper floors of schools, apartments, tailor shops. Men with radios, binoculars, grease pencils. Their job was simple. Call the coordinates. Call death. Hook's job was simpler. Stop them before they could speak. They'd taken this building 3 nights ago, room by room. The 1/5th Marines had carved a hole through mortar, furniture, and screaming. The radio said Charlie had pulled north toward the Citadel, but the artillery said otherwise. "Movement again," Coulter whispered. Hook adjusted slightly, sliding the mirror disc across its jury-rigged swivel. 2 rooftops over, he saw a glint sunlight bouncing off a scope. Then a figure in black pajamas leaned to adjust a tripod. Another scout. Hook fired. A sharp crack. Then nothing. The figure jerked forward and vanished behind the ledge. Coulter raised an eyebrow. 2. There was no cheering. No high fives. Sniper work didn't feel like victory. It felt like cleaning something rotten from a wound necessary but ugly. Hook exhaled, wiped the sweat from his temple with a filthy sleeve. His dark hands trembled slightly as he reset the bolt. Coulter offered a canteen. "Want to switch positions? Let you breathe a little." Hook shook his head. "I breathed through the trigger." That was how it began. 2 confirmed scouts in 20 minutes. No one saw them go. No enemy muzzle flash had returned. No artillery followed. Just silence. Thick and unnatural, hanging like a trap between the burnt trees of Tran Sao Van Street. From somewhere beyond the Citadel wall, a single burst of AK fire echoed. Hook didn't flinch. He was watching the windows. Always the windows. 22 would fall. And every one would die without ever seeing the man who killed them. February 4th, 1968. Hue City, South Vietnam, 1,500 meters from the Imperial Citadel. It was the quietest battle of the Tet Offensive. No helicopters thumping overhead. No screaming squads bounding through alleys. No fire teams lighting up doorways with M16s. Just the slow heartbeat of a sniper's war patience. Breath, angle, and glass. Corporal Elijah Hook Mays hadn't moved in almost 2 hours. His back ached from the recoil shock through rubble. His fingers were starting to go numb from gripping the M40's worn walnut stock too long. But his eyes? Still sharp. Still fixed on the southeastern edge of the citadel, the ancient walled fortress that now hosted a nest of VC spotters, NVA fire coordinators, and radio men slipping through torn roof tiles like ghosts. They were too far for a typical Marine squad to see. Too small. Too silent. But Hook saw them. Next to him, Lance Corporal Darren Tabbs Coulter rotated the small Japanese-made field scope on its mini tripod and marked grid references in a damp notepad. 312, Coulter said, voice barely above breath. 2 figures on the second floor of that old print shop. One has a radio. One's watching east. Hook said nothing, just adjusted his improvised mirror scope 2 degrees to the left. The image shimmered for a moment like sunlight caught on oil, then focused. 2 men, skinny, worn faces. One crouched in the shadows behind a shattered counter, whispering into a handset. The other, standing behind a wooden beam, staring down the road toward an American forward observation post they'd just secured this morning. That outpost had already taken 2 mortar hits. And Hook knew why. He exhaled slowly. These weren't just scouts anymore. These were coordinates men. Killers by numbers. Second from the right. I see him, Hook said. Confirm. Hook didn't respond. He didn't need to. The shot rang out like a cough short, muffled, swallowed by the concrete walls and smoke of mid-afternoon hue. The rifle barely moved. The standing figure in the print shop dropped as if kicked in the knees. The radio man spun to his left, eyes wide, and then a second shot cracked. The radio man didn't fall. He folded chest first into the dust. Coulter whistled low. 4. Hook blinked once. The scope's lens had fogged slightly. He wiped it with a strip of gauze tied to his trigger guard. The mirror, barely larger than a Zippo lighter, caught a faint beam of sun and sent a brief glint into the alley. Hook swore softly. Glint. Coulter had already seen it. Shift, he said quickly. 2 degrees east, window blind, just shifted on the bakery. Hook rolled left over the sandbag-padded veranda, dragging the M40 with him and carefully resetting the homemade scope mount. The angle was tighter now. He was looking across a rubble-choked intersection that once sold bread. Now it sold death. The enemy spotter was good, better than the last ones. He only exposed the lens for half a second, then vanished back inside. A decoy? A sniper? Hook didn't trust it. I'll wait, he said flatly. Coulter nodded. Gotta feed them a reason to look again. 2 blocks away, a Marine fire team moved into the open, cautiously sweeping past a burned-out Vespa and a collapsed bamboo cart. Their point man stopped to gesture toward the bakery. That was enough. The spotter peeked again. 1 inch of binocular glass. Hook fired. The lens shattered. A red mist fogged the curtain behind it. 5, Coulter muttered. The Marines in the street never even looked up. They didn't know. They didn't need to. Hook's job was to erase, not explain. By mid-afternoon, they'd moved 3 times. Each time, Hook carried the M40, and Coulter carried the scope parts carefully wrapped in a wool sock. Mirror detached and cleaned between shots. The deflection system couldn't handle too many shots without realignment. It was fragile. 1 good knock, and the calibration was gone. But for now, it held. It let Hook do what even trained snipers couldn't shoot from cover without ever exposing his position. And that was changing the battlefield. Not with bombs, not with airstrikes, but with the silence that came after the shot. Hook checked his logbook. He'd only missed once. That shot had gone wide near the tin roof warehouse at dawn. Too far. Wind kicked up right as he fired. I want that one back, he muttered. You'll get him, Coulter said. Or his friend. The radio crackled. Company command. Be advised. NVA artillery hitting Citadel Quarter. 2 forward observers unaccounted for. Suspected scout team still active near Old French Cinema. Hook raised an eyebrow. That's close. Coulter was already unfolding the map. Hook stared into the scope again. adjusting the fragile mirrored angle with a surgeon's touch. "Let's find them," he said. February 4th, 1968. French Cinema District, Hue City, South Vietnam. They didn't call it a kill zone. Not out loud. But that's what the old French cinema had become, a web of alleys, balconies, and broken neon signs, crawling with shadows that didn't belong to the buildings. What used to be a place for love stories, and dubbed American Westerns, now reeked of cordite, damp plaster, and blood that had soaked too deep to be washed away. Hook slid into position behind what used to be the concession stand. He didn't say much as Coulter unwrapped the homemade deflector again. The mirror disc, dulled now, pitted with carbon scoring from the last 3 engagements. It had survived longer than Hook expected. But Hugh didn't care about expectations. It broke steel, bone, and minds in equal measure. Window left of the projector balcony. Coulter murmured, scanning. "See that?" Hook did. 2 silhouettes, moving like they thought they were ghosts. One crouched low with a handset, the other with a notepad or map case, maybe a chalkboard. Both wore black NVA regulars in disguise, too clean for local VC, and they were laughing. Hook didn't blink. His eyes stayed locked in the angled lens, tracking their shoulders, their weight shifts, the telltale lean of a man about to lift binoculars. He clicked the elevation knob once, then paused. Wind shifted. "You feel it?" Coulter raised a wet finger. Slight left to right. Hook adjusted. The mirror wobbled on its mount, duct tape loosening, boot rubber soft in the heat. "You good?" Coulter asked. Hook exhaled. "I'm ready." The first shot punched through the balcony rail like a hammer through sheetrock. The man with the map case flew backwards into the shadows, legs twitching. The other man dove instinctively, a mistake, exposing his head above the sill. Hook's second shot came before the first shell casing hit the floor. The body slumped across the balcony edge, then slid off like a broken puppet. "7," Coulter whispered, already adjusting the tripod. Hook wiped the mirror again. Below, in the street, American grunts moved cautiously along a shattered sidewalk, unaware that just 15 seconds earlier, 2 sets of artillery coordinates were seconds away from landing in their rear. By 1400, the rain returned. Not heavy, just a soft, misting drizzle that made concrete shine and sweat run cold. Hook shifted his poncho beneath him and checked the deflector. The glue was wearing thin around the scope rail. He could see a faint shimmer where the mirror was loosening under recoil vibration. They wouldn't get too many more shots from this angle. "You ever think about why they keep putting their scouts in the same places?" Coulter asked. Hook didn't look up. "They think we can't see the pattern." "They're wrong." "No," Hook said, scanning. "They're just used to fighting people who follow rules." Coulter glanced at him. "We're not?" Hook's jaw tightened. "Not when the city's burning." The next target came quicker than expected. A runner. Young. Maybe 17. Lean. Fast, bare feet, slapping through the inner courtyard of the cinema. He stopped to speak to someone behind a broken crate stack. That's when Hook saw the glint of a wire field phone, strung low behind him. Spotter relay. Hook's crosshairs settled just behind the boy's right shoulder. He hesitated. He could see the fear in the kid's hands, shaking. "He's passing a fix," Coulter said quietly. "Look." The boy raised one hand and tapped twice against the crate. Morse. Short burst. Coordinates confirmed. Hook pulled the trigger. The boy fell like he'd stepped into an open manhole, crumpled mid-stride. A second figure lunged from the crates, older man, heavier, revolver in one hand, screaming something they couldn't hear. Hook fired again. Silence. 10, Coulter said. The radio crackled. Delta 1 actual. This is War Cloud. Be advised. Citadel spotter teams now confirmed Kia. No new shelling in 40 minutes. Keep pressure north. Hook rolled onto his back and stared at the collapsing ceiling above him. 10 kills. None of them fired a shot. None even saw him. And still, the war was just breathing in again. "You good?" Coulter asked. Hook nodded slowly. "Just wondering how many more mirrors we can find in a city this broken." From the rooftop, he could see the north edge of the Perfume River. Smoke spiraled above the citadel walls. Somewhere in the distance, an M48 rumbled across a bridge, while medics ducked under sniper fire 3 streets down. Hue was hell, but for now, this kill box was silent. Hook set the rifle down, rolled his neck, and drank from a tin canteen. He could already feel another team moving in through the smoke. They'd have to set up again. New window, new angle, same mission. February 4th, 1968. Nguyen Truong to primary school. Hue City, South Vietnam. The school had been closed for weeks, but the chalkboard still held its last lesson. Faint Vietnamese characters, some half erased, spoke of rice quotas and patriotism. On the far wall, the portrait of Ho Chi Minh hung crooked, one corner scorched from a grenade blast. Hook and Coulter didn't speak as they climbed through the broken window. The roof was half collapsed, and the second floor had a sniper's dream. Clear elevation, overlapping fields of fire, north-facing view. Hook adjusted the tension strap on his scope rig. The mirror had cracked slightly in the corner. Still usable, but one more jolt, and it might misalign mid-shot. He'd have to compensate on instinct. "You see the whip antenna?" Coulter asked, scanning with his compact field glass. Hook nodded. In the courtyard of a neighboring Buddhist temple barely 50 meters away, a thin antenna jutted out from behind a stack of stone urns. Not military grade, civilian issue. Probably tied to a field radio with an extended range coil. And next to it, crouched low beneath a shredded orange prayer banner, was a man wearing an old French officer's cap, binoculars, notepad, one knee resting on a crate of artillery markers. Coulter cursed under his breath. "He's coordinating live. That's not VC. That's an NVA fire director." Hook steadied the M40. The improvised mirror deflector had to be angled slightly downward to catch the courtyard from their current position. The problem was wind. The breeze was circling like a stirred pot, changing direction every few seconds. He'd have one clean shot. Maybe. "Wait for the handoff," Hook muttered. The man below tapped something on the notepad, handed it to a runner, who vanished into the temple's rear corridor. Hook's finger hovered near the trigger. The fire director pulled out another slip. He was prepping a second coordinate set. Hook tightened his grip, counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The shot cracked through the second-story window frame, splintering aged wood as the round curved downward and struck center mass through the director's chest. He didn't fall. He slumped forward, folding over the crate like a deflated doll. Coulter exhaled. "That's 11. But Hook wasn't smiling. Look right side of the temple entrance. Another figure had emerged, older, thinner, holding a handset and shouting into it. "Too late." Hook fired again. The man dropped into the temple dust, handset still buzzing on the ground. 12. Below, chaos. An NVA mortar team scrambled to reposition. They just lost their coordinator. Without him, the team would fire blind, or worse, not at all. Coulter keyed the radio. "Delta 1, this is Talonai. 2 NVA observers down in Buddhist courtyard, western flank. Mortar teams, now uncoordinated. Recommend push. Now." The reply was immediate. "Copy, Talonai. Hammer team advancing. Keep overwatch." Hook chambered a new round. For a moment, he just watched. In the haze below, 4 Marines from Hammer Team darted across the alley. They moved fast, faster than most would dare in this neighborhood, trusting maybe that someone unseen was watching their backs. Hook smiled just slightly. Then his scope caught movement again. Second-floor balcony of the school opposite. Black-clad figure, leaning forward, holding something metal, thin, a scoped Mosin. "Sniper," Hook hissed. He didn't adjust the mirror. He abandoned it. Hook rolled sideways, lined the rifle raw eye to iron sight and fired off instinct. The round cracked and punched through the sniper's chest before he could even lift the bolt. Hook exhaled, heart hammering. 13, Coulter said. "Damn, that was clean." Hook said nothing, just looked down at the fractured mirror. The recoil from the rushed shot had split it clean in 2. The deflector was done. "I can patch it," Coulter said, hopeful. Hook shook his head. "No, we can't gamble misfire on glass. Not now." He looked at the backup scope in his bag, old Redfield, foggy and misaligned. It wouldn't give him the concealment the mirror trick had. But they had no time to spare. The north side was lighting up. More runners, more spotters. Hook reached into his pouch, pulled a new strip of rubber, a spare spoon bracket, and began rebuilding again. The deflector wouldn't last forever, maybe not even another hour. But in Hue, sometimes another hour was all that separated a squad from a funeral. As the wind picked up again, Hook and Coulter reset the M40 on a shattered desk. A new direction, a new flank. Same mission. Erase the eyes. Let the boots on the ground live. February 4th, 1968. Tay Lock Churchyard, southwest of the Citadel Hue City. The grave markers had no names. Just slabs of stone, riddled with shrapnel, leaning in silence beneath shattered banyan trees. Hook crawled forward on his elbows, mud seeping into his sleeves. He'd never fired a shot from a cemetery before, not in combat. The idea used to feel disrespectful, but this wasn't a resting place anymore. It was dead ground, unseen from the rooftops, shaded by collapsed masonry. The patch of graves behind Tay Lock Church had become the perfect overwatch point. And across the open alley 60 meters due northeast was a radio tent. Camouflaged in tattered roofing sheets and laundry lines, the tent looked civilian. But Hook had spotted it 3 times now. Every hour, someone inside raised a wire antenna, whispered into a handset, then ducked back down. No Marines had pushed that far yet. But the shells had. That tent was feeding them. Coulter laid beside him, his field scope now balanced between 2 loose bricks. He tracked the movement like a hawk, logging each figure. Same guy, black pajamas, always crouching, never standing. Discipline, could be VC, could be regular army. Hook nodded. The rebuilt mirror deflector version 3 was holding, but barely. This one used a scratch side view mirror from a burnt-out Vespa and was mounted with a busted rifle sling. Crude, but the angles lined up. Hook exhaled and focused. The image was warped at the edges, but it was usable. He watched the man lift the antenna again, no more than a blink of motion, then bring the handset to his mouth. Coordinates, Hook muttered. He's not guessing, he's watching. The M40 barked. The figure collapsed instantly, tangled in the antenna line like a puppet yanked mid-dance. 14, Coulter said. They waited. Nothing stirred in the tent. Then a second man appeared. Younger, startled. He rushed in, then back out, fumbled for the radio. Looked up, Hook shot again. The round passed clean through the flap and struck him mid-turn. The body fell out onto the dirt like a dropped sandbag. 15. Below them, Marines from 1/5th Charlie Company began pushing through a schoolyard 2 blocks away. They were out of range for Hook's rifle, but not for enemy mortars. Except no shells came. The spotters were gone, and without them, the artillery was blind. They moved at dusk, fast, low. 2 kills and 1 mirror shot left in the deflector before the rubber mount cracked. Hook didn't complain. He just tucked the broken rig into his satchel, wiped the lens with his sleeve, and crawled behind Coulter through a collapsed brick arch. They were headed for the western flank, the edge of the French Quarter, where the NVA had seized an old colonial post office and turned it into a command center. If there were any high-value scouts left, they'd be watching that. They set up behind a split-wall vines coiling over crumbled limestone. The roof of the post office sat 80 meters across an alley strewn with rebar, tangled laundry lines, and the remains of a motorbike convoy burned the night before. From a 3rd-story window, just under a sandbagged lip, movement, then glass, then an arm. A figure leaned forward with a field glass. Hook froze. The wind was swirling. The shot would have to angle through a narrow pocket between 2 drainage pipes. 1 gust, and he'd miss. Coulter whispered, "He's tracking our boys." You miss, he drops back inside. We don't get another look. Hook didn't speak. He adjusted the mirror slightly. A creak from the deflector arm. Rubber groaned. He fired. The mirror snapped on recoil. The scope jutted upward, but the bullet hit. The scout fell back through the window, binoculars clattering onto the sill. 16. Hook winced and pulled the deflector apart. It was done. Shattered mirror, Frayed rubber. Splintered bracket. No rebuilding this one. You sure? Coulter asked. Hook nodded. Yeah, it's over. But he wasn't talking about the deflector. He was talking about the game the NVA had been playing all day. They watched. We watched back. Now their eyes were gone. From the high tower of the churchyard, the sound of boots came friendly. Charlie Company was sweeping through, rifles up, flak vests streaked with soot. Hook leaned into the wall, rifle across his lap, sweat running cold down his neck. Coulter looked at the shattered deflector parts in the dirt. You gonna build another? Hook just stared down at the courtyard where the radio tent used to be, where now there was only stillness. I don't need to, he said. I already saw enough. February 5th, 1968. Residential block 6B, northeast of Hui's railway station. The air smelled like kerosene, dried rice, and fear. Block 6B had once been a maze of tenements, 4-story apartment buildings with balconies like bird cages and rusted shutters flapping in the monsoon wind. Families had fled days ago. Now only rats and riflemen remained. Hook crouched low behind a stone fence, choked with broken rebar and spent brass. His M40 was slung across his back. No more mirror rig. That had shattered with the last shot in the churchyard. From here on, it was glass to eye. Old school. Exposed. Direct. You sure about this one? Coulter asked from behind a collapsed planter box. Hook didn't answer immediately. His brow furrowed as he surveyed the second-floor corner window of the tenement across the courtyard. Faded laundry still hung from the railing, bloody in places, fluttering like surrender flags. Then he saw it. A thin wire, stretched taut from the window to a concrete rooftop across the street. Not electrical, not phone line. It moved when the wind didn't. Tripwire relay, Hook said. Coulter scanned with his scope. Jesus, that's a manual signal rig. Hook nodded. Not electronic. It's old school VC. Somebody's watching and yanking that line whenever they spot troop movement. Relay fires, probably from behind the Citadel wall. Gives them a delay advantage, Coulter muttered. We'd never pick it up on radio. Exactly, Hook said. We've killed their spotters, but now they're using field riggers' direct visual relays. The Marine sniper pulled his pack forward and flipped open the logbook. His last confirmed was 16. This would be number 17, if he could spot the rigger. He took a deep breath and brought the M40 to his cheek. No mirror, no trick shot. Just him, the glass, and the wind. They waited for 15 minutes. The only sound was the wind sliding over caved-in roofs and a distant M60 rattling 4 blocks north. Then, motion. A figure emerged just behind the curtain of the target window. Thin, shirtless, holding a pencil flashlight in one hand, gesturing to something behind him. Got him, Hook said. He watched as the man tugged the wire, paused, then did it again. Precise, coordinated. Coulter didn't even need to say it. Hook squeezed the trigger. The shot slammed through the window frame, and the man dropped instantly head down, arms falling limp across the sill. 17, Hook said flatly. But the wire still twitched. Coulter spotted it. Second man. He's inside the relay room. Hook adjusted 1 inch left and saw him. Barely. Just a shape in the shadows. Moving like a man who thought he was still unseen. He had no idea the mirror trick was gone. That Hook was shooting clean again. He lined it up and fired. The shape jerked, stumbled backward into the room, and didn't reappear. 8-10. 10 minutes later, the relay wire sagged. Dead slack. No tension. No pull. Coulter keyed the radio. Talon I to Delta 1. Confirm 2 VC field riggers down in Block 6. B-trip relay non-functional. No new signal traffic in last 6 minutes. Recommend immediate push before new system can be rigged. The reply came fast. Talon I, this is Delta 1 actual. Roger that. Bravo team rolling now. Appreciate your quiet work. Hook chuckled once. Quiet work. The field below their position looked like a butchered comms map, broken wire, splintered rooftops, busted antennae, dead runners lying face down with slates still clutched in their hands. But no more shelling. No more mortars. No more freak artillery strikes landing on squad medics, mid-extraction. For the first time since the Battle of Hue began, the forward lines were breathing. As the sun dipped below the tree line, Hook removed the scope from the M40 and wiped the lens one last time. He stared at it. Not just a piece of glass. It had been his lifeline, his lie detector, his decider of life and death for 2 full days of blood-soaked, smoke-blind rooftop warfare. He passed it to Coulter. "Clean it. Re-zero it. We'll need it again tomorrow." "You think they'll keep coming?" Coulter asked. Hook just nodded toward the horizon, where faint thuds still echoed from the citadel's inner wall. "They haven't stopped in 1,000 years, he muttered. "We just gave 'em something to think about." That night, they slept in the shell of a tea shop on the outskirts of the block. Hook lay on a straw mat, listening to the faint pop of distant flares. The kills weighed on him not as guilt, but as arithmetic. 22 confirmed. All scouts. All with eyes. All men whose job it was to see death before it arrived. He had made them vanish. And for that, 22 squads would live to see morning. February 6th, 1968. Near the Dongba Canal, Hue City, the men in the foxholes never knew his name. They didn't see the mirror rigs, the deflectors glued together from Vespa scraps and ration tins. They didn't see the hours Hook spent cutting rubber in silence, or the way Coulter whispered wind calls between bursts of mortar fire. To most of them, the rounds just stopped coming. The sky cleared. The bridge ahead didn't vanish in a sheet of smoke and shrapnel. To the grunts of Bravo Company, the miracle came without explanation. But Hook wasn't doing it for medals. He was doing it because he had to. Because if you let one more runner reach a relay post, that was another medic blown apart. Another fire team pinned down by rounds that should have never found them. They were ghosts. And Hook's job was to erase the ghosts. 6 teams through the alley with no contact. Coulter muttered, radio pressed to his ear. 2 medevacs extracted. No incoming since 0500. Hook pulled the scope off the M40 again. The rubber had warped in the night, humidity swelling the homemade mount beyond repair. There would be no more mirror tricks today. He'd already buried 2 broken rigs in the dirt behind Block 6B, their fragments too sharp to risk carrying. "You miss it?" Coulter asked. Hook looked at him. February 7th, 1968. Rear compound of MACV headquarters, Hue City. The metal cot creaked as Hook sat down, rifle resting across his knees like a sleeping dog. Outside, diesel engines coughed and clattered as fresh ammo trucks rolled in from Fubai. Sandbags were being stacked by the dozen. A new fire base was taking shape near the Perfume River Bridge. But Hook wasn't watching any of that. He was watching the inside of his own skull. The kills weren't ghosts. They had names, probably. They had families. But he hadn't asked. He hadn't wanted to. Because if you start giving the dead names, you stop pulling the trigger. And in Hue, hesitation was death. A soft knock on the plywood door. It wasn't military issue. Just some salvage sheet hung on rusted hinges. Coulter poked his head in. "Debriefs in 20. Hook nodded. "You get breakfast?" "Half a peanut bar and a cigarette I didn't smoke." Hook let out half a chuckle. That counted. Coulter stepped in, holding something under his arm, a clipboard wrapped in cloth. "They want a statement." Hook raised an eyebrow. "A what?" "A full sitrep. On the kills, dates, times, confirmed scopes, techniques used. They're putting together citations." Hook snorted. "Figuras. Come on, man. You put a whole platoon across the Citadel line without taking a single artillery strike. That's not luck." Hook didn't respond. He just reached into his pack and pulled out the last shredded remains of his deflector. A cracked mirror, a twisted bracket, and a piece of black rubber melted into itself from muzzle flash heat. He held it up between 2 fingers. "This," he said, "was the only reason they never saw me." Coulter sat across from him. "That and your damn spine," he muttered. "You know how many of us would have backed off the moment the first bracket failed? You rebuilt it. Twice. Under fire." Hook looked him dead in the eyes. "Because if I didn't, someone else died. I wasn't going to let them walk blind into shells meant for me." Hook's record, until Hue, was clean, but unspectacular. Qualified sharpshooter. One confirmed kill in Da Nang, another near Khe San. But he was a quiet Marine, not the kind that drew attention in a war where body counts made headlines. He didn't smoke much, didn't drink much either. He wrote in a black spiral notebook most nights. Nobody asked what. Some assumed poems, others guessed letters. Coulter had seen it once, only numbers, distances, wind shifts, rifle zero changes, scrawled in tight obsessive handwriting. Hook had been preparing for this fight before it even started. You ever wonder, Coulter asked, why you could do it? I mean 22 scouts, not riflemen, not frontliners. These were their eyes. You blinded them, man. You ever think why it was you who had to do that job? Hook stared at the floor for a long time. Then he said, because I know what it's like to not be seen. Back home in Alabama, they hadn't seen him either. Not when he enlisted. Not when he graduated basic at the top of his marksmanship class. Not when his drill instructor, Gunnery Sergeant Rawls, wrote a personal letter recommending sniper school. Hook had walked through life invisible. Until now. Now, entire operations shifted around his crosshairs. Outside, a corporal walked by dragging a case of mortar tubes. Another Marine followed, humming some soul tune off a cracked transistor radio. Hook caught the end of the lyric. A change gone come. Maybe it had. But not yet. Not for him. Coulter stood, adjusting his sling. They're waiting. Hook rose, slid the bolt back on his M40, cleared the chamber. One last time. He left the remains of the deflector on the cot. Didn't pack it. Didn't even look at it again. As they walked out into the pale morning light, a fresh platoon of replacements jogged past young faces, clean boots, new packs. One of them nodded toward Hook, not knowing who he was, not knowing what he'd done. Hook didn't return the nod. He just looked down at his shadow and realized, for the first time in a long while, it was finally visible. The deflector. You miss being invisible? He shook his head slowly. No, I miss not needing it. They moved again. By mid-morning, the Marines had pushed past the Dong Ba Canal and into the vegetable markets where the street signs were still in French. Buildings here were older, narrower, denser. You could feel the walls watching you. Hook and Coulter set up in an abandoned tailor shop. The second-floor window gave them a view over the rooftops, and more importantly, the bridge. The last bridge. The NVA had dug in deep at the far end, and anyone trying to cross without cover was a dead man. But the fire was getting sloppier, less coordinated, as if the enemy had lost their eyes. Command says they want a final overwatch before Charlie pushes the flank, Coulter said. If they spot another scout, call it. If not, green light for assault. Hook laid flat behind a rack of charred sewing machines. He propped the M40 across a shattered workbench and scanned the far bank. Nothing. Just sandbags, rifle pits, the occasional movement of a helmet ducking behind a crate. But then, a figure. Third floor, right side, half exposed behind a shutter, glint of glass. Binoculars. Hook tracked the body. The man was standing in profile, muttering into a handset. Relay team, Hook said. He's still got eyes. Coulter leaned over. You can hit that? Hook's mouth tightened. Only once. The M40 was on its last zero, the scope fogging slightly at the edges. No deflector now, no trick angles. If he missed, the man would duck back and vanish. He dialed in elevation, took one deep breath, watched the man speak one last phrase into the phone, then fired. The round passed through the wooden shutter with a burst of splinters. The man dropped instantly, slumped over the windowsill, headset still clutched in one hand. Coulter blinked. 21. Hook didn't smile. He was giving the go order. Below them, the bridge was silent. No mortars, no panic fire. The NVA hadn't noticed yet that their last spotter had gone quiet. Coulter keyed the mic. Talon Eye to Delta 1. Final observer eliminated. No signs of replacement. Recommend immediate advance. You're clear. The reply came fast and cold. Copy, Talon Eye. Charlie's rolling. What the grunts didn't know was that the battle turned not on bombs or charges, but on that one shot. On a moment where a nameless rifleman saw a sliver of glass, read the wind through a crumbling shutter, and ended a voice before it could speak again. They didn't know how close they'd come to being blindsided. They didn't know that death had been watching them until Hook watched back. They left the tailor shop as the first platoon crossed the bridge. Hook paused before exiting. There was a single thread still pinned to the wall. Red, silk, untouched by fire. He took it, tied it around the sling of the M40. Didn't say why, just moved. That night, command logged the bridge seizure as minimal resistance. They'd never know how much death had been deferred by 22 silent shots, and one black Marine who built a deflector out of trash and rage. Hook sat on a step behind a burned-out bus station, sipping lukewarm coffee from a dented tin. Coulter sat beside him, legs stretched out, boots muddy to the knees. "You know," Coulter said, "they're probably gonna write up the bridge assault like it was clean. Tactical brilliance, superior numbers, all that." Hook didn't reply. Coulter looked sideways. "You good, man?" Hook just stared forward. Then finally he said, "I watched 22 ghosts disappear, and for once, they didn't come back." February 10th, 1968. Northeast Sector. Citadel Wall Hess City. There were no speeches, no orders barked, just the sound of boots in wet stone alleys and the crackling of distant rifle fire echoing off ancient fortress walls. Hook's squad wasn't even supposed to be in the area. Delta Company had taken losses clearing the northeast quadrant of the Citadel. They needed overwatch. No time to requisition fresh snipers. The captain had tapped Coulter's shoulder and said 2 words. "Take Maze." Hook hadn't spoken on the way in, just checked his M40 times and tied that same red silk thread tighter around the sling. Not for luck. Not for memory. Just for quiet. They entered through a breach in the outer wall, blasted open by recoilless rifles the day before. The floor was littered with bricks, half-melted plastic, and a single sandal with the strap burned off. "I thought we were done shooting," Coulter muttered. Hook whispered back. So did they. From the top floor of a crumbling guard tower, they could see the North Canal and the smoking remains of what used to be a Vietnamese administrative compound. Below, Marines were moving in staggered lines between garden walls and temple courtyards. The area looked clear, but something was off. Too many rounds were hitting too close to advancing squads. Not random potshots corrections. Someone was still feeding enemy mortars. Someone with glass, elevation, and a working relay. Hook dropped to a knee and scanned the high balconies. At first, nothing. Then, just over the arch of a ceremonial gateway movement, a small dome-shaped rooftop with a collapsed bell tower behind it. Hook saw a dark silhouette shift, then a flash of reflected sunlight. Binoculars. But not just that. A map board. A wire dangling down into the shadows. Another dam spotter rig. North Dome, 80 meters. Final observer. Hook said. Coulter tracked it. "Got him. You can make that shot?" Hook exhaled. Once. He didn't overthink it. No time for ritual. No wind call. Just memory, instinct, and training forged through every moment that brought him to this tower. He took the shot. The round split the air, slammed into the scout's shoulder, pitching him backward off the perch. The map board flew. The wire snapped against the stones. No more corrections, no more eyes. 22, Coulter said. Hook lowered the rifle slowly. That was the number. 22 ghosts, erased. Below, the 1st Marine fire team surged forward into the courtyard beneath the dome. No incoming shells, no random detonations. Just boots on gravel, rifles raised, confidence restored by a bullet no one saw and a man they'd never meet. The sun was rising now. You could finally see the detail in the walls, the old paint, the bullet holes, the history scraped raw by war. Coulter leaned back. "You think they'll count this one?" Hook shrugged. "Doesn't matter. You're telling me you just cleared the last forward spotter in the Citadel and you don't want your name in the report?" Hook looked down at the red thread on his sling. "No one remembers the wind," he said. "Only the flags." As they descended the tower, the city below was changing. Civilians were trickling back toward the river. Kids without shoes. Grandmothers with empty baskets. Men in tattered dye helping each other dig out bicycles buried under rubble. They didn't wave at the Marines, just watched them pass. Hook passed them too, rifle slung, eyes forward. No words, no thanks. Just the knowledge that, for once, the street wasn't about to disappear in fire. That evening, command logged the sector as secured. Enemy coordination ceased. Mortars fell silent. Marine losses dropped to near zero overnight. One officer wrote in the margin, "Enemy observers eliminated with surgical precision." He didn't know who, didn't know how, didn't know that a single black Marine, using busted optics, sandbags, and trash, had turned the battle from inside the shadows. Hook didn't ask for anything that night. No debrief, no recognition. He sat on the back step of an abandoned schoolhouse, knees tucked under him, watching the stars come out through broken roof tiles. Coulter brought him a coffee, black, no sugar. "You sure it's done?" Hook didn't answer right away. Then he looked up at the citadel, glowing orange in the distance. "No. But the part that was mine, that's done." And with that, he laid the rifle down beside him, wrapped the red silk thread around the barrel one last time, and closed his eyes. March 1968. Phu Bai Combat Base, South Vietnam. The war rolled on. It always did. After Hue, the Marines moved north toward Quang Tri. Hook didn't go with them. Not right away. His file got flagged. Mental fatigue, they called it. Not PTSD. Not shell shock. Just fatigue. A polite word for too many ghosts and too little rest. He didn't argue. They sent him back to Phu Bai for recuperation. That meant cots, boiled coffee, and long silences in canvas tents where the wind hissed like distant voices. Hook sat most mornings on a bench outside the comms hut, cleaning a rifle he no longer fired. His M40 had been reassigned. He'd turned it in without a word. They offered him a Commendation Navy Commendation Medal with Combat V. He said he'd think about it. He never filled out the paperwork. Coulter visited once before heading back north with 1/5. He brought a newspaper. Front page. Marines storm Hue Citadel victory secures South. No mention of Hook. No mention of the deflector, the mirror shots, or the 22 observers who never sent their final coordinates. Just a grainy black and white photo of boots on ancient stone steps, rifles raised, mouths open in a cheer frozen in time. Coulter folded the paper and handed Hook a small box. Nothing official, just brown cardboard tied with green tape. "What's this?" Hook asked. "Something from the tailor shop." Hook opened it. Inside was a single new scope. Same model. Factory cleaned. No rubber mods. No mirrored angles. Just clean glass. Beneath it, the red silk thread. Retied. "Thought you should have one that didn't almost blow your face off," Coulter grinned. Hook stared at it. "Thanks," he said quietly. But he didn't mount it. He just closed the box and set it beside his pack. Word spread, as it always did. Some grunts heard whispers the black Marine sniper who could shoot around corners, the ghost maker of Hue. No photos, no interviews, just stories passed over cigarettes and K rations. Some didn't believe it. Others swore they saw him just a shape in smoke, a flash of glass, and then silence from the enemy's side of the street. He became legend by accident, myth without ego, and Hook let it happen. He didn't need the war to remember him. The silence he created was enough. Back in the States, Hook returned to Alabama. Quiet. Unannounced. He didn't wear his uniform. Didn't bring medals. Just a duffel bag, a scuffed rifle case, and the red thread tied around the handle. He worked as a machinist for a while. Fixed clocks. Refused interviews. When asked if he'd served, he'd say yes. Nothing more. No stories. No kill counts. No war tales over bourbon. What he'd done in Hue wasn't for glory. It was for the men who crossed that bridge without knowing they were one breath away from never seeing home again. Years later, a military historian compiling sniper accounts from the Vietnam War came across a strange entry. An operations log listed 22 forward observer eliminations over 3 days in Hue. All precision kills, all confirmed by battalion command. but no shooter named. Just a call sign. Talonai. The historian tried to find the Marine. He never did. Because by then, Elijah Hook Mays was gone. A name left off the monuments, a face never etched in stone. Just a pair of tired hands that once bent broken optics into battlefield salvation. And yet, if you ask the veterans of Hue, especially those who crossed the Citadel Bridge under full cover, they'll tell you something different. They'll say a man was up there watching over them, that shells stopped falling when his rifle cracked, that the ghosts on the rooftops vanished without sound, that somebody out there, somebody quiet, had their back, and when you ask them his name, they just nod. Hook. And sometimes, if you look close at an old rifle in a glass case, somewhere in a forgotten Marine Corps armory, you might still find a red silk thread tied tight around the sling, frayed, faded, but never unteed. Because some wars are won not by those who shouted loudest, but by those who were never seen at all.